Donald Trump may have pulled the United States out of the Paris Agreement to combat climate change, but if former U.S. Vice President Al Gore is to be believed, Americans will fulfill its terms nonetheless. The 69-year-old environmental activist was in Berlin to preview An Inconvenient Sequel, a follow-up to his Oscar-winning 2006 film An Inconvenient Truth about global warming. Citing the axiom from physics that for every action there is an equal counterreaction, Gore said that Trump's election had galvanized and energized environmentalists in the U.S. "The good news is that we are working around Trump," Gore said. "The U.S. is going to meet its commitments under the Paris Agreement, regardless of what Trump says or does or tweets. He has isolated himself." Gore added that the majority of Republican voters in the U.S. think that the country should have stayed in the Paris Agreement. In perhaps the most unlikely scene in the film, Gore visits the Republican mayor of a town in the most conservative part of Texas, which had just completely gone over to using renewable energy sources. And that's not the only example of Americans acting locally. In his speech on June 1, President Trump said that he was elected to represent Pittsburgh and not Paris, Gore related with a smile. And the next day the mayor of Pittsburgh said, "Well, we're still in the Paris Agreement." Gore said that despite Trump's statement to the contrary, coal is not coming back, adding that fossil fuels also had no future as an energy source. Censoring science while the end of An Inconvenient Sequel is surprisingly upbeat, and Gore clearly wanted to convey a positive message in Berlin. He agreed that Trump remained a threat. The former vice president took the current U.S. president to task for suppressing scientific evidence and accused him of blocking a report, drawn up by scientists every 4 years, which concluded the Earth is already feeling the effects of human-caused climate change. Excerpts from a draft of the report, which was leaked to the New York Times newspaper, were published on Monday. "The people deserve to see the full report," said Gore. "And I would like to formally call on the Trump administration to stop suppressing this report, to stop trying to censor scientific information." For Gore and the other makers of An Inconvenient Sequel, the science is clear. The film begins with footage of melting glaciers and ice sheets and then moves on to scenes of flooding in Miami and devastating hurricanes in the Philippines. Most researchers think that such phenomena are connected to climate change. Gore warned that if global warming is not reversed, severe weather is only going to get more frequent. Where the upsurge in climate activism is concerned, I think the credit may go to Mother Nature, Gore said. The climate-related extreme weather events have really opened people's eyes. Gore said climate change was to blame for temperature extremes, so-called rain bombs, droughts, forest fires, flooding and sea level rises, and the spread of tropical diseases. Climate crisis is a democracy crisis. Empowering people is one thing, but convincing the people wielding political power is another, and both Gore and his film underscore how important the office of the U.S. presidency is in leading global efforts to combat climate change. Since leaving politics, Gore has become a full-time environmentalist. The film chronicles how climate protection initiatives, including the launch of an environmental data collection satellite, were thwarted under George W. Bush, who beat Gore for the presidency in 2000 despite losing the popular vote. Trump, who got some 3 million votes fewer than Hillary Clinton in 2016, has been even more dismissive of environmentalism. For Gore, climate change is connected with a reform of the U.S. political system and, in particular, the winner-take-all rules of the Electoral College. "In order to fix the climate crisis, we have to fix the democracy crisis," the former senator from Tennessee said. "I do think we should get rid of the Electoral College system in the U.S. and go to a system where the popular vote winner wins the election. You have the system in Germany, and it works okay, right?" Gore also said it was crucial to restrict the influence of big money in American politics. He added that the Internet revolution, which was beginning to displace TV, had made it possible for political candidates to raise funds from individuals. He singled out Democrat Bernie Sanders for praise in this regard. "It is now possible to run a very robust and potentially winning campaign without taking any money from lobbyists and special interests," Gore said. "I think that could be the future of American politics, and if it is, it will make those who are in elected office more accountable to the people and less beholden to the special interests." An Inconvenient Sequel is playing in the United States but doesn't get a widespread theatrical release in Germany until September 7. Winds of up to 320 kilometers (200 miles an hour) ripped roofs off houses and downed trees in Port Vila in the island nation of Vanuatu. Category 5 Cyclone Pam hit the capital on Friday, March 13, 2015. Vanuatu President Baldwin Lonsdale said the cyclones that the nation had experienced were directly linked to climate change. "We see the level of sea rise. We see change in weather patterns." President Lonsdale dubbed Cyclone Pam a monster that had devastated the country. "It's a setback for the government and for the people of Vanuatu. After all the development that has taken place, all this development has been wiped out." He said 90% of the buildings had been destroyed in the capital alone. So far, 6 people were confirmed dead and 30 injured from the cyclone. The cyclone devastated numerous countries across the South Pacific. At least 9 nations have experienced some level of devastation, including Vanuatu, Solomon Islands, Kiribati, Fiji, Tuvalu, and Papua New Guinea, a statement by the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs said. The UN's Children's Fund UNICEF estimates that at least 60,000 children have been displaced or affected by the cyclone. According to UNICEF, hundreds of children in Tuvalu, Solomon Islands and Kiribati are also affected. "It felt like the world was coming to an end," said UNICEF Salis Clements, one of the organization's staff members, who was in Port Vila when the storm hit. For years, small island nations such as Kiribati, pictured here, have been trying to combat climate change. Seychelles President James Mitchell said on Monday that Cyclone Pam was a clear manifestation of climate change and called on the international community to wake up to the impact of global warming. The inhabitants of the most vulnerable islands have been trying to secure coastal areas to prevent the tides from washing away the soil. While these measures assist in the short term, more needs to be done to tackle the root cause of rising sea levels. Climate change has exacerbated the severity of natural disasters and their frequency. That's worsening the impacts on different communities, the president of island nation Kiribati, Anot Tong, said. Climate change and disasters are related. He added, "Scientists, however, say it's impossible to attribute single weather events like Cyclone Pam to climate change. We must especially help the poorest and most vulnerable people," UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon said in the aftermath of the cyclone. "Prevention of natural disasters is a global task," he added. "Climate change is intensifying the risks for hundreds of millions of people, particularly in small island, developing states and coastal areas." A new climate treaty will be negotiated later this year. Author Sarah Stephan